This should be the final days of humanity. As the asteroids come in, please listen.
Happy howdy doody, everybody, and welcome to another ranty, rambly Daniel Green sci-fi fantasy opinions video. In the last fantasy news, I had quite the ranty ramble about cover artists, and to my surprise, a lot of people left comments along the lines of, I miss this type of Daniel thought piece. I miss when he would just come up in front of a green screen, do some weird stuff, and give us opinions. And I'm a man of the people. And I want to give you that once again. If that's what you subscribed for, I want to scratch that itch. So lift up those shirts, turn around, and let me get at that spine, because I wanted to give you my list of top 5 sci-fi fantasy shows of all time. Now, obviously, purely personally subjective, and I have not seen every single show out there. Hell, I have not watched Stargate from beginning to end. I'm sorry, I should. I've heard it's amazing, but I have not, so it's not gonna be on my list. I've probably seen some stuff, though, that you haven't seen. So hey,
Stay a while and listen.
and let's talk about the greatest science fiction and fantasy television to ever air or stream. Couple notes. There are personal favorites of mine that I'm well aware are personal favorites because they're important for the genres, and sitting down to watch them in 2023, you kind of have to squint a little bit to really get why people love that show so much, and today, they aren't quite as entertaining. Prime example, The Twilight Zone. Many people would argue the most important piece of science fiction fantasy television of all time when it comes to shaping the trajectory of so many incredible shows to follow it. From X-Files to Fringe, I'd argue Lost, and so many more, they have roots in this show. And in its best episodes, Twilight Zone is still amazing. The Salesman in Death? Me, dude, that is good television. I don't care how visually outdated it looks. I mean, The Twilight Zone had some of the best sci-fi writers of its era penning masterpieces for it, but there are also, you know, some stinkers. And in 2023, I think it's fair to say that we have higher bars than we used to in terms of character development, in terms of representation, in terms of visual effects. Things have gotten better. There's a reason that we are in what people often refer to as the golden age of television. I mean, I'm constantly hearing people say there are too many good shows on for me to possibly watch them all. I'm not trying to say Twilight Zone is bad. I'm just saying for this specific video where I'm trying to give you 5 shows that I know will entertain the shit out of you, Twilight Zone isn't necessarily gonna crack into my top 5, it probably would be in my top 10. And for this next point, I'm gonna be taking some shots. And this is purely out of like selfish, I just think people are not speaking logically when they put Firefly in their top 5 shows of all times for science fiction and fantasy. Why? Because, in my opinion, I am putting my opinion in your brain and saying this is what you're trying to say, which is not entirely fair, but I think I have a bit of a point here. Firefly is not in your top 5 shows of all time. And what's in your top 5 shows of all time is the potential you saw in that one season. I think Firefly was a great season 1. But saying Firefly is better than so many shows that managed to stay entertaining, dynamic, and revolutionary for season after season after season, you don't like Firefly that much. You like what you think Firefly would be that much. I'm just saying, I've watched it and I think it's good. I think it's really good. But is it one of the best things I've ever seen for these genres on the small screen? Later on in the show, I'm actually going to give a very high spot to is going to only have 1 season. So people are going to say, oh my god, aren't you being a hypocrite? But the difference is that show was meant to have 1 season. Whereas Firefly is setting up a bunch of stuff you think could be great, but it doesn't actually get to finish or say anything because it's stopping and you're filling in the gaps, which is not fair. We're getting spicy here today, all right? That's not even the spiciest thing I'm gonna say. Let's go. I'm gonna be sweating like a preacher by the end of this. And feel free to call me a hypocrite. I'm gonna contradict myself. This is a list based out of passion and love, not logic. So without any further ado, let's get into a show that you can level many of the same criticisms I did against the Twilight Zone at, and that's going to be Star Trek: The Next Generation. At number 5, a lot of people expected this to be higher. Some are outraged it's here to begin with. The difference is, for me, TNG, on average, holds up better than Twilight Zone. Now, I say that. fully aware that the first season of TNG just almost skip it. Like, it's that bad. They did not know how to pick up after Kirk to make Picard work yet. The crew dynamics were not entirely figured out. They potentially were getting ready to put number 2 at number 1. Coming out, that sounds like it'd be very painful. And let's just say the demographic of who was making up the writer's room comes through pretty viciously. Combine that with the reported behind the scenes just catastrophe that was happening in terms of the chemistry on set. Ugh, it shows through. Fortunately, from there, TNG began to revolutionize what Star Trek could be, and in my opinion, is the reason Star Trek is still relevant to this day, despite having weaker entire series and movies attached to the franchise. Because we saw at its peak what science fiction television could truly be. There became a core principle to so much of the conflict within this show that I think, despite what some people may tell you, ended up paying off in incalculable ways. Ways that even Data here could not fully get processed through in his brain noggin. Time after time, we see a logical, not action-dependent captain debate, consult, and reason his way out of conflict after conflict. There is action in TNG, don't get me wrong, and it's, in my opinion, handled better than the original series' approach to action. But TNG at its best was when it looked at Picard and it looked at its crew, their specialties, and it said, how could this group of specialists take this brilliant man and elevate what television as a whole, even outside of science fiction, could be? This is a show all the way back in the 80s that was already having debates that we're actually having to have right now about sentience and artificial intelligence. It also continued the tradition of Star Trek being progressive. The ways in which it also expanded the lore and mythos for Star Trek is largely responsible why the follow-up series were able to continue and take the material they built and just launch the trajectory of the franchise into just mega stardom. And I maintain that in terms of a Star Trek crew, there is not a more solid one from top to bottom than TNG's. The Enterprise is top dog for crew still to this day. Spock, get your... I can't even actually dismiss Spock. Leonard Nimoy is incredible, and I love him, and I don't want to finish that thought. But Data's just as good. Picard's the better captain. I'd rather be under a commander that would actually solve a problem with logic instead of fucking it. That's actually like a thing that didn't happen too many times in the original series. It's like a meme. It's kind of there, it's kind of not, but it's there, but it's not as bad as like the meme will make you think it is. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have pulled a ruse over you. I have been deceitful. I have lied because I recorded a fake section to this video that I edited live on Twitch. That's right. They thought the number 4 spot was going to be going to The Expanse, which is a believable entry. This is a fantastic sci-fi epic, and it is one that is absolutely worth your opinion, but I didn't actually know what is happening because I, in reality, am giving the number 4 spot to Twin Peaks, the incredibly trippy, boundary-pushing, genre-bending experience from David Lynch and Mark Frost. Why would I have done this? Well, get used to not getting satisfying answers, because Twin Peaks is a unique experience in all of media. I am not exaggerating when I say I have experienced nothing like Twin Peaks in my life, and I am 100% confident I will not experience anything like it again. This is also, if I'm being honest, a little bit of the devil creeping into our talk here, because if you are watching this video hoping to find a new show to watch, this is the one you are most likely not to like, because it is so stubborn in its staunch refusal to be what you try and pinhole it to be. For example, the first episode involves a local town finding out that one of their beloved children has been murdered. Anyway, later on in the series, when the interdimensional demons are talking backwards to Agent But that is not to say there is not catharsis found. That is not to say there are not answers to be had. It is just whether or not those answers are to questions that have been asked. This is why everyone who makes one of those Twin Peaks explained videos gets laughed at by the fans. It's not all meant to be coherently understood necessarily. There are general themes and evolving ideas that push forward the story, but at the end of the day, you must remember this is from the mind of the man who put out these tweets and uploaded a lot of videos like these to his YouTube channel.
Good morning. It's December 16, 2022, and if you can believe it, it's a Friday once again.
He also once campaigned for one of his actresses to get a Best Oscar nomination by sitting out on the street with a cow. Why he did that? I'm asking why. Why did you do this? Now, while this insanity attempting to tell a story does orbit around an entire small town, at the very core of the story is one man named Agent Cooper.
This is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee. I've had, I can't tell you how many cups of coffee in my life, and this is one of the best.
Providing a bedrock of stability that this show needs to be able to land tonally or structurally at all. And as a main character, Kyle MacLachlan delivers his career, I would say unequivocally, best performance as Agent Cooper. If the Boy Scouts were actually what they tried to appear to be in commercials and not Netflix documentary worthy, they would be Agent Cooper personified. This man is integrity. Existential horror, soap opera, and noir in such quick succession you will not be able to take a pee break. This is the dark chapter of our final five, if I do say so myself. It is one that I will be rebuked for putting in here. It is one that people will be angry with me for encouraging, but I am asking you to be brave. I am asking that if you want to go to the fringes of the fantastical genre and the science fiction genres, entertainment value. Ooh, Twin Peaks is a way to go. Twin Peaks violates while soothing. Twin Peaks introduces while ending. And most importantly of all, Twin Peaks is just perfectly itself. You might notice that this is also the one I'm giving the most vague details on. That is because pretty much telling you anything about this story, in my opinion, spoils the story. Seriously, if you are considering going into Twin Peaks, which you actually, in my opinion, need to be in the right, I want my expectations not to be subverted, but obliterated. If you're in that mood, then go check it out. If not, I highly recommend you check out number 3. There's nothing here that the sci-fi genre has to offer that could rank above these. You have to be switching over to fantasy at this point, Daniel. There is no way you are not. You are wrong, sir! Because I am going for a sci-fantasy show. One that is largely disguised as a science fiction show, but once you get into it, it is sci-fantasy. Oh, and it might be the best sci-fantasy show to ever air. I can say with supreme confidence, I will have plenty of comments echoing me saying,
"So say we all! So say we all!"
Oh, can I get a Starbuck? Okay, that is right. We are going for the Battlestar Galactica remake. I am once again fully willing to admit there are weaker episodes here. Every time Ellen Ty comes on screen, I want to tear my eyeballs out and feed them to my cat. But that is because I hate her with the same type of rage that I hate Dolores Umbridge and Bev. Oh my God, is this someone who just viscerally pulls hatred from me? And that's just called good character writing. I do want to say Detective Apollo, worst episode. And the dinner episode where she's essaying Apollo and it's played off as goofy fun times, another terrible episode. There is even an entire season in the middle that's weak. I'm gonna say it. The second to last season, not the biggest fan of it. All I have to do to counter that, though, Hot Paulo. Oh my God. Yes, the final 5 reveal, sloppy. But bear with me. I need faith. I need you to reach onto your screens, grab on with your little robot hands, and stay with me, because what we have here making up for these losses, what we have making up for these imperfections, is the beauty in them. Because this is, at the end of the day, a show about people breaking. It is not about people finding salvation. It is not about people finding an end that brings them joy and happiness. And instead, we see characters who lose, who fall apart, reach the true depths of despair. And one of my favorite characters in the whole show, the ending of their arc, is a word I can't say on YouTube without getting demonetized because it becomes too much for them. Getting into the basic premise here, the Battlestar Galactica remake is about humanity's eradication because a nuclear holocaust is unleashed on humanity, wiping out the 12 colonies and killing hundreds of billions. There are only 50,000 human beings left, and they are floating around in ships not meant to carry people over long journeys largely. And at the heart of it is the titular ship, the Battlestar Galactica, which was about to be decommissioned. The only reason it survived is it was already so out of date, it didn't have the latest cybersecurity in it that the Cylons, when they attacked, were able to hack and depower, wiping out the rest of the military in their initial invasion. From there, we see our characters go through the initial adrenaline of the fight, the shock of the aftermath, and the depression, the overwhelming defeat of knowing they already lost the war. This is not about fighting back in some way where you're able to pull out a victory. You're done. This is over. Humanity will never be the same again. The scars of what the Cylon did cannot be erased. And then some bad creative decisions are made in the later seasons that make this a little more hard to swallow. Again, the entire Final Five thing, apparently they didn't plan it from the beginning, and that f***ing shows. But the early seasons, and I will say the very end itself, amazingly, it came out of a stumble, and Battlestar Galactica did a cool, sick kickflip and did stick a pretty rad landing. Early first 3 seasons, I believe, just have this wonderfully crafted structure to them, combining a sci-fi space desperation setting with this Christian Greek mythology religion that puts so much weight behind every major important character's decision, because you're not just following some pilots, which you are, you're not just following some crewmen, which you are, but you're also following the new president, Laura Roslin, who I believe was the Secretary of Education, but so many people died, she's now the president and maybe a prophet. Throw that in there. We also were following Adama, the commander of the Battlestar Galactica, who was about to retire and now is like, okay, we don't want this to become a military-run government, so I need to respect this president, but she's just the Secretary of Education, and one bad call means we all die. The balance of power, the importance of democracy, and the venom of the individual combined with the paranoia of learning that Cylons can now look like us and they are within the fleet. I have rarely felt a show deliver on this premise as well as early seasons of Battlestar Galactica do, and that is not even getting into the greatest character we are going to mention in this entire list, and that is, oh, Kara Thrace, it's Starbuck. My God! It is so easy to slip into pitfall after pitfall when writing a jaded, alcoholic, trigger-happy pilot female character. We have all seen it done poorly. They just wipe away their femininity and make them something that just feels like one of the boys. That is not done with Starbuck. And Starbuck is probably the most capable person at her best in the entire fleet. At her worst, she has the potential to eradicate us all with poor decision-making skills. And her arc, her destruction, her rise, her failures, and her successes, they will bring tears into your eyes. I'm just gonna play my favorite Starbuck moment of the entire show real quick.
Let him go.
Frack you.
I want her to shoot me. I don't know why, but I want her to shoot me too. It has been a joy as a Battlestar Galactica fan to watch the Star Wars fandom discover Katie Sackhoff through her recent appearances in The Mandalorian, and I just want to say, welcome to the train. We've all been fans for a long time, and yes, she is that badass and perfect. Apparently also running a podcast. Have not listened to it, but if you're interested, go check that out. And on the final note, because we've been mentioning villains, I need to bring up Gaius Baltar. Yes, his character at the, I would say, latter half of the show is bumbled. But in the first half of the show, I still, knowing it's going to be fumbled in the second half, love following Gaius Baltar because he is a piece of shit, a charismatic and enjoyable piece of shit. And if there is one character type that does not get tired, it's one that you love to hate. And Gaius Baltar encapsulates that perfectly. This man, by the way, minor spoiler warning, it comes up very early on the show, he's responsible for all of it. The downfall of humanity. He could not keep his Panacea in his pants, and because of that, the Cylons got the info they needed to bring a nuclear holocaust. And then you find out his personal individual decisions, and he gets worse. Gaius Baltar goes down like cold medicine. You know you have to take it. You know it's a part of the recipe that makes your sickness better, but oh, you can't. The cherry flavor you put in there is even worse. He has a weird psychosexual relationship with a mind hallucination the show clearly didn't entirely know how they were going to handle throughout the seasons, and it's a Cylon put in his head. Or is it?
What's up, Doc?
Just keeping up with the old exercises.
This also results in some of the funniest moments in any science fiction show ever, because this thing is trying to seduce him while he's talking to, like, you know, the president.
Just keeping up with the old exercises.
And I don't know the actor's name off the top of the head. I just want to give so much credit to the performance here. He is a tech nerd who has risen to celebrity and is overall doing harm to humanity because of his own insecurities and shortcomings. What are you doing here, Ray? And one final addition to my praise for Battlestar Galactica. I know there are people out there who will preach that this show is unrealistic with its depiction of space combat, that it leans too much into the Star Wars with the broadsiding, with the Vipers. And to them I say, stop being a fucking nerd. Look how cool this is. Do you see how cool this is? Oh my God! Especially if you are a fan of Rule of Cool, Battlestar Galactica will not disappoint. So that's 3 of my top 5. Can I get a Carathrace? Woo!
So say we all.
Okay, now we're gonna continue on into my number 2, and I bet a lot of you thought this was gonna be number 1. I bet many of you thought, Daniel, that's going to be a number 1, and I'm sorry to say, but Fringe is not. Fringe is my favorite science fiction show of all time, and I have been careful to make that distinction. Do not quote me on that. I actually have not been, but yes, Fringe overall is my favorite sci-fi show of all time. If you want to know why, I have a 3-hour video on the first 2 seasons, and my well over 1-hour video on the 3rd season is currently in my editor's hands. You'll be getting a lot about that. I will just sum up my overall love by saying Olivia Dunham is just as badass as Cara Thrace, and her emotional arcs just break me on every single rewatch. I do not think there is one character in this list who goes through more on the personal level than Olivia Dunham in Fringe outside of Battlestar Galactica, because living through the end of humanity, that kind of is worse. And then on the other side of that, you have Walter Bishop, who is a mad scientist who used to experiment on Olivia Dunham and has ripped fabrics in the holes of the universe, slowly going through a redemption arc to try to be like, hey, I actually don't want to experiment on children anymore. I'm really sorry about that. And that's a character arc that I can sell anyone on any day. If you want to hear more about this masterpiece of a show, check out the video, blah, 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 blah. And now let's move on to number 1. What could be better? What could be better? What could be better? What could beat out Star Trek's The Next Generation, The Expanse, Battlestar Galactica, Fringe? Well, I've been telling you this whole video. I've been giving a sermon. I've been preaching! And that's because our number 1 pick, it's Mike Flanagan's masterpiece. It's the masterpiece that Mike Flanagan's been foreshadowing since Hush. It's the masterpiece that Mike Flanagan has been putting in things since Gerald's Game. And oh, baby, it is Midnight Mass! Before we get into the greatness that is Midnight Mass, I want to tell you, I'm aware of its faults. You have to just accept that in the culture of the island, the isolated, cold island that Midnight Mass takes place on, there's a quirk. There's a quirk that exists where every single person on the island communicates in monologues. I don't know why. Hey, you're not one to judge people culture, all right? Sit down. What's your culture? A cookout every Thursday? F you. They're allowed to monologue. And Mike Flanagan, he's an indulgent creator. But would you rather have an indulgent visionary who has complete creative control of this show, putting incredible ideas about faith into the script through monologues, or just another bland-ass CSI show where they, oh, guess what? It was the guy teacher who was in it for 3 seconds at the beginning who killed the guy. Oh my God! Midnight Mass is a masterpiece, and I have so much to say about it. By the way, this entire video was just a way to get you to hear me talk about Midnight Mass. I rambled off the cuff about every other show, and I have a full script for Midnight Mass. You have been bamboozled, and you can't stop me. And now you might be mad enough to click off this video, but I'm gonna make a bold statement to reel you right back in. Midnight Mass has the greatest antagonist in the history of television. No, I am not talking about Bev, though, let's make it clear, Bev. I'm talking about the preacher. I'm talking about the man who twists faith, the man who exploits insecurities and others to gather his cult. Now, you might hear that and think, oh, Midnight Mass is an anti-religion show. Are you paying attention? No, it is not. It is actually a show that finds tremendous beauty in faith. I personally began to question my own lack of faith because of Midnight Mass. Midnight Mass is a celebration of personal, intimate belief in a higher power, whether it's Christian, whether it's Muslim. Oh my Lord, this show celebrates people's ability to find hope. And then it critiques the leeches that pull them down. And oh, this is the best leech. I'm not gonna spoil how that theme is fully realized in the show, but this preacher, Father Paul, is the greatest leech in the history of TV, and oh my God, you understand him, you know why he's doing what he's doing, and you don't entirely blame him, because what he experienced, yeah, he thinks he's been given a gift from God. Has he? That's for you to find out. That's for you to find out. That's for each individual watching this show to figure out. Yes, it made me jealous of those that have faith. I personally am agnostic. I don't know the answers to the world. And I think it's important to note, neither does Midnight Mass. We have so many people spouting throughout this season. It is one season of television. After that, you're done. That's what Mike Flanagan does. He does a one-off and then he backs out. And also, if you've seen other of his shows, like House of Usher, like Haunting of Hill House, quite a few house shows with this guy, you will see reoccurring characters in heavy makeup playing other people, which is a blast. It's a lot of fun to kind of go through and go, wait, that guy's that guy? No, But in this cast of characters, he takes his troupe of actors and pushes into, we see different perspectives on what it means to believe in God, what it means to give yourself to something else. And no other fictionalized piece of television, in my opinion, has done it more reverently than Midnight Mass, more politely well criticizing. And I think even the most religious people will appreciate what this show is saying about the destructive power of unchecked blind faith. Anyone with a reasonable mind on their shoulders can see throughout history what faith is capable of if it is misused. Father Paul reeks of Jim Jones for a good goddamn reason. And for my book fans who are like, Daniel, I haven't talked about a book in like 20 minutes. I need you to talk about a book. Fine. He feels like a Joe Abercrombie character put in a hen house. Do you know what potential that level of antagonist has among a bunch of isolated, unsuspecting, simple folk? We see it, and no one on this island, ladies and gentlemen, thinks they are a villain. And through monologue after monologue and sermon after sermon, we watch rational characters who are just going about their lives, be tempted. Some of them succumb, others rebel, but at the end of the day, they are all caught up in the storm of Father Paul, even the island's atheist. And I want to talk about Riley here. Yes, he looks a whole lot like Jack from Lost. Do not let that distract you too much, because this is a faithless man. And if you're going into this show with an obnoxious internet atheist mentality of, oh, that means he's gonna be right about everything. No. In fact, I find Riley's character arc within Midnight Mass to be the harshest in terms of how it treats him because of his beliefs. That's not to say Riley's a bad person. In fact, I think he makes the most selfless decision of any individual in the show. But after you see their ending, what the arc is headed towards, it's inevitable. Without faith, without a belief in what could be, without potential, there's only one outcome for Riley, and it's where Midnight Mass lands. And it's largely why I found myself questioning my own lack of faith. Contradicting that, we have Green, Erin Green, played by Mike Flanagan's actual wife, who is the most personal with their faith. They do not feel the need to proselytize, they do not feel the need to convert, and instead they have a non-romantic friendship with Riley where the two of them clash, but not argue. They just discuss worldview, death, all while never directly disagreeing on their fundamental differences when it comes to God. And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, this show also, yes, has plenty of sex appeal in the sheriff, but I am not going to diminish this man's incredible arc by just talking about how scrumptious he is. The lone Muslim on the island. The conflict between the sheriff and his son over Muslim versus Christian is one of the most well thought out and respectful treatments of different sects of religions colliding I've ever seen. And well, I do believe this actor was handed the worst monologue of the show, the one that felt the most just out of nowhere. I'm not even kidding, like 30 to 40% of the runtime of Midnight Mass, not exaggerating, monologuing. But even these two, suffering from the isolation of the island, are inevitably caught up in the cataclysmic tide that has ensnared this island. I'm not gonna lie to you though, this is just a cult story. Fucking Bev is proof enough of that. This is a cult story. Don't lose focus of that. We all hate cults, religious or not. That's why it's chosen. Father Paul's mouth, whether he realizes it or not, is chewing through what can be incredibly healthy and helpful material provided by religious texts and twisting it to justify a vile, selfish belief, but cutting through the overwhelming selfish monologues that are violating religious texts. We have some truly beautiful speeches. This actress here gives my favorite monologue on the concept of forgiveness I have ever heard. This young actress is able to act across this Joe, who's one of my favorite characters in the whole show. You'll see why once you start. That has not only the actor in tears, but me every single goddamn time. She captures so magnificently all of the emotions people like to pretend are just erased when you reach forgiveness, and lets you know, oh, they are still there. But forgiveness is not about getting over something. Forgiveness is far more complex than that. And for you to find out what exactly that means, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just gonna say, go watch Midnight Mass. Can I get a carrot thrace? And one thing I want to end with this cut-in on is letting you know that yes, there's a fantasy element. I don't want to give away exactly what it is from the start, but just know that it is used as a metaphor for all the things going on thematically within the town. And that's why I think it absolutely should be classified as a fantasy show. I really like it when the fantasy element is at the core of what makes the narrative work, and I think Midnight Mass executes that perfectly. So yes, it's absolutely a fantasy show. There's one thing I hope you take away from this video, ladies and gentlemen. I hope it's a strong desire to watch this masterpiece from the mind that brought you Haunting of Hill House and from the mind that's currently taking on Stephen King's Dark Tower. Ooh, if you're even a little bit curious as a Stephen King fan, guess what? Mike Flanagan is a lifelong one as well, and he is going to be helming quite possibly the most ambitious Stephen King adaptation yet. We're ignoring that movie, and at the end of the day, I am willing to say with my chest, Midnight Mass is the greatest science fiction or fantasy show of all time, in my opinion. Thank you very much. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. Have a good one, y'all. Peace!